And welcome in everybody. Saturday morning Fantasy Firebox. We are back week 14. I'm your host, Tony Jigsaw Cutillo, joined by my partner in crime, Mr. Pittsburgh, John Coker. And listen, John's on the streak. I got to tell you, because he was on here about 4 weeks ago and he mentioned a couple Pittsburgh names in Ray McLeod and Mr. Fryermuth. And guess what? Those guys have been pretty good at if you're streaming them. And I actually picked up Muth off the waiver wire after he told me that. And he's been taking me over top of guys like Tyler Higbee. So I thank him for that. But John, what's up, buddy? How you doing?
Yeah, doing good. Yeah, same thing. Muth's been carrying me. It's nice to just be able to pick up that guy off the waiver wire and plug him in. I'm not saying he's out there beasting like a Tony Gonzalez of the heyday, but he's putting up points at the tight end position pretty consistently.
Yeah, listen, especially with this year, and that's what we're going to talk about again. Fantasy Firebox brought to you by Win Daily Sports. Catch us on the replay at Heat Ratio Sports as well. Injuries, man. I mentioned in the preview video earlier, injuries is the word of the year. Like I've never, do you ever remember a year where there's been this many injuries since all of you've been playing?
No, I was thinking about that like earlier this week or last week. Yeah, it is. And then one, in all reality, COVID is a thing. And, that is really throwing wrenches in. A guy tests positive on Monday, Tuesday. Is he coming back? Was he vaccinated? Missing 1 game, 2 games. But even I think the short-term IR that, is rather new definitely changed the landscape a little bit of, not so much the questionables that, linger week to week. They'll just shut them down. But, as a fantasy player, I would prefer that than, getting strung along and having guys, try to suit up and play when, they really shouldn't.
Listen, this year, in my opinion, is really separated the people that actually know this sport and the people that don't, because you really have to deep dive and dissect these NFL rosters. Like, I'll give you an example. This week, now I lost so many players. I lost Derrick Henry to IR. It was killing me. I've had Christian McCaffrey, IR, killing me, right? So I've been rolling with Myles Gaskin as like my number 1 running back this year, okay? And I'm fighting for the playoffs in my season. I'm fighting. So this week, I have to start Amir Abdullah because that's the only guy I can find as a running back on the waiver wire. That's how bad it is. And the funny thing is, luckily for me, he's getting a little play in Carolina because McCaffrey's hurt and he's backing up Hubbard, and maybe I'll get 7 or 8 points. I mean, that's what this has come to. It means, I'll tell you this, your core studs who you drafted, and especially those guys that are in probably those 5 to 9 round gems that we talk about that you can kind of like have building blocks that take over for those studs are really important, because right now rosters, John, are completely decimated across the board.
Yeah. And sometimes the studs, aka Travis Kelce, you can't even count on,
Patrick Mahomes,
Josh Allen. Yeah, I'm with you. I tell you what, I swear, in my one league, I was GM of the year with injuries. Still couldn't make it to the playoffs. Like you, I mean, Gus Edwards, McCaffrey, Montgomery, went and made a move to get Gibson, then he got nicked up. Kareem Hunt, Michael Carter. It's literally all in the same league.
Crazy.
So, yeah, no matter what I did, I'm, GM of the year, replacing guys, making moves, and then next guy falls down. So, yeah, but that's the name of the game. And it does open up, like you said, it does open up an interesting free agent acquisition each week, running them waivers with guys coming out. And yes, it does. The cream rises to the top in terms of fantasy managers. But yeah, there's a lot of interesting speculative pickups you could do. I mean, Elijah Mitchell at the time, picking him up earlier in the year, but let alone every week that Elijah Mitchell's out. Is it Hasty? Is it Wilson? Like, what's, and that was all after Mostert went out for the year. Yeah. When you think about it.
No, you're absolutely right. Our man Mike checking in says Been a while since I seen John. Good to see you back. Listen,
Thanks,
John's
man.
always on the roster. He's just, here's the thing. I've had a lot of comments recently, and Mike says, "Hope we get to hear song of the week for the CD collection." Listen,
Oh,
man, I'm gonna be honest with you. Miss those days as life gets busy, and not saying you'll never hear that again. Trust me. So, just Mike, just so you know, I got a lot of things cooking up over at HRS. Just stay tuned. So, we are going to do a Heat Ratio live show. It's going to be a combination of all the personalities of Heat Ratio. I will have my own show called The Final Judgment. That will be coming soon. And we just announced a couple new shows as well. You'll see John, you'll see Dave whenever they have the opportunity. That's the thing. When you do this thing in this business, just because you're not there week after week doesn't mean you're part of this. You're not part of the squad. So we will be back. We did have some, John. We had some good CD collection takes. I'll tell you that.
yes, we did. Yes, we did.
Never knew what kind of dust you were going to blow off with John's CD collection. That is for damn sure. But let's just get right into it because, we'll talk about, and it kind of go hand in hand, but just talk about who the top quarterback, running back, receiver is, on this slate. And listen, every week it's different. There is honestly no more guys that you can lean on. And I'm going to tell you, the running back position, and I know we're talking about quarterback, but the running back position as a whole is so dynamic because in the beginning of the year, if you take everybody's preseason picks and you look at them now, whether because of injury, whether because of lack of production, whatever it may be, completely different. Completely different. Now, I will say, and I know John was on some of these trains as well, I will say that I did have Austin Eckler and Jonathan Taylor in my top 5. And I was a guy that said I will not draft Alvin Kamara top 5, and I will not draft Christian McCaffrey number 1. They scared me, right? I couldn't foresee Derrick Henry getting injured, but I mean, besides that, John, this week, let's just go back to quarterbacks. And who's your top quarterback? Who can you trust? Will Patrick Mahomes repeat against the Raiders again, where he probably had his best game of the season? I mean, what do we expect this week from the quarterback position?
I don't know. I don't know.
That's the best
I'll
answer,
tell you,
man.
I've been riding Justin Herbert. He's been at a decent price, and truthfully, he's the one that I feel the most confident about of all quarterbacks almost in the league. I feel like the offense runs through him, even when Eckler's getting his points. You mentioned him. A lot of it's through the air. And I just feel like the consistency that Herbert has really been, he's kind of been my go-to, him and Keenan Allen. I've been riding Keenan Allen in daily pretty much the whole year because he was just not being, in my opinion, priced up to where he should be or his abilities.
And now he's out.
Yeah. Also on that same team with AJ Brown. Yeah, but I like Herbert missing Keenan Allen this week. I don't know how much.
No Mike Williams, no Keenan Allen. I mean,
Mike. I don't know. Mike, is he out?
He's done IR, man. He's another IR squad. So
yeah, so that's what scares me. And he's up over 7,000. So that's what scares me this week with Herbert. Yeah, truthfully, I'll pick a number out of a hat out of the top 10 guys up there and choose one.
It's tough. It's I mean, listen, do you pay 8,000 for Patrick Mahomes, who has been one of the most inconsistent quarterbacks in fantasy football this year, if not the most inconsistent quarterback? Josh Allen at 7,800 against a Tampa Bay team that, are getting some players back on the defensive side of the ball, and Buffalo by any means 9-6 losing against Jacksonville, against a guy that shouldn't even be a head coach in the National Football League, Urban Meyer. I mean, come on. That's just that's unexplainable, right? So, I mean, do you go to the well and you say, I'm going to go with Tom Terrific at 7,600? I'll tell you what, honestly, I love Justin Herbert. Not having Jalen Guyton now as your number 1 wide receiver scares me a little bit. That's one thing I'm afraid of. So I actually just pivot to Kyler Murray. I honestly, if I'm going to pay, for a quarterback and I'm going to go over $7,000, I'm just going to go, in my opinion, with the elite, which is Kyler Murray. I think he has to be your number 1 player this week. And I don't care who he's going up against or playing at home. This kid, when he's not injured and he's healthy, he is a stud. right? He is a stud. Now I get, week to week, listen, against Green Bay, he only gives you 11, right? So you're like, when we're talking about DFS, doesn't throw a touchdown, throws a couple picks, right? Doesn't really get the rushing game going. But those instances are going to be far and few between. This is going to be a battle, right? This is going to be an NFC West battle between the Rams and the Cardinals. And again, I got to hand it to Cliff Kingsbury. I mean, he's got this team rolling. So for me, John, if I had to go with my top play quarterback position, it's got to be Kyler this week.
Yeah, I'm going Dak. I don't know how many times I'm going to. I don't know how many times I'm going to get burned by him, but if there ain't no other choice, like I might as well go back to the well with him. Him and Herbert have been really the two guys, even coming into the year, that I thought were going to be really good. Dak killed me in quite a few weeks for fantasy this year. But I'm going with them against Washington division game. They need a win, so I'm going with Dallas and Prescott.
Yeah, listen. Dak is getting really close to Kirk Cousins territory for me with that dead to me list. Okay, because every time I start some of these cats, and I think that it's a great matchup, we're gonna do, and then they just disappoint. They always disappoint. And I'll tell you what, this week, like I love these value plays, these value guys. I see like literally nothing. Right? I honestly don't. Like, I don't see a lot at all. I mean, you look at some of these matchups. I mean, do you want to go Matt Ryan for 5,300 at Carolina? What has Matt Ryan showed you this year? From a fantasy standpoint, that he is going to be a guy you can rely on. I mean, listen, his last 4 weeks, his highest point total was 12. They're talking 2, 4, 11, and 12. I mean, that's not going to win you any weeks, right? So, Taysom Hill against the Jets maybe could be a streaming option. He did play well last week against Dallas. And the Jets are deplorable. They suck. So maybe you go with a 5,600 Taysom Hill. But I think this is the week, John. I know we talk about value. I think this is the week. You just roll with your stud. You roll with your core guy. Pay up for the money and figure it out later. And that's why we'll go right to the running back market. And we're going to ask the same question. Top running back plays. And John, you mentioned the guy earlier. I love him. He was my guy coming into this year. Still my guy, Austin Eckler. He's doing exactly what we thought he would do. He's getting the ball through the air. We all knew that Austin Eckler would not be the guy on the ground to get those 20 to 25 carries. That's not the kind of back he is. But right now, with no more Anthony Lynn, Staley said, we know your best avenue to production is coming out of the backfield. And John, that's what he's actually been able to do the last few weeks.
Yeah. I have Eckler. I've been, obviously I'm up on, following what he's been doing, but
yes,
all the stats are there, and, he gets into the end zone, but my running backs, I always just want those carries. I want those attempts and those rushing yards. I feel very uncomfortable when I'm relying on running backs that, get a lot of their points from the receiving end, just for consistency purposes. But that's the thing. He's been consistent with it. Throughout his career, he's catching those balls. And that's just like, additional, almost like free points that you're getting above his rushing totals. Yeah, Eckler, he's definitely going to be. Could he be the fantasy MVP if he turns it up for the next few weeks through the playoffs, which he could?
It's a great question, because when you look at it, right, he is in the past had that ability to just ball out, right? I mean, you essentially, right, could make the same argument for Joe Mixon, right? Because this is how, the running back situation is decimated, because, Dalvin Cook is always hurt anymore this year. McCaffrey no longer. Kamara, you don't know. I mean, listen, okay, he's finally coming back, but what do we expect? Could he be the unsung hero for the last 3 weeks? Derrick Henry, maybe he makes a miraculous comeback for the Super Bowl week in fantasy football. You just never know. But I honestly do. I believe, John, that he could be the fantasy running back MVP in Austin Eckler. I do. And I think the thing about the young coach out there, the one thing that we always hated under Anthony Lynn was, oh my God, you look and no more Eckler in the backfield. You got Jackson in the backfield, right? And you're like, what is going on here? Like, this is the guy you paid all this money to. And I think Anthony Lynn was trying to outsmart himself. And in the beginning of the year, John, Staley did the same goddamn thing with Roundtree. And I'm like, what is going on with Austin Eckler? Right? Finally, I think about week 7 or week 8, they finally turned the corner and said, all right, this is our guy. And you finally don't see him coming out of the game as much. He's getting consistent double-digit carries. But, John, he's got to hold on to the goddamn ball. Dude's fumbling like 2 times a game.
Yeah. The minute you say fumbles, I go right to James Robinson. Because 2 out of the past 3 or 4 weeks, he fumbles a ball, gets benched. Here comes Carlos Hyde, and there goes another fantasy loss. 2 weeks out of like the past 4. And he has a great matchup in the playoffs, like this time of year. But it's fumble, sit the bench. I can't take it.
It's I'm telling you that the Tiki Barber syndrome is brutal, right? It is brutal. But let me ask you about this, because here's a very interesting developments going on for the Detroit Lions this week. Now, I understand the Detroit Lions, you're not really looking to start anybody on the Detroit Lions because DeAndre Swift now obviously out. He's been out. But now Jamal Williams out on the COVID list as of now. So do we put our trust in – I'm probably going to butcher this name. I've said it 100 times. I say it different each time. But Igwebuike, okay, are we going to be Mr. Godwin Igwebuike? Or are we going to be put our faith? Could he be a gem, John? $4,000 for draft. Somebody's got to run the goddamn ball in Detroit. I might actually put a lineup together, and I might put Igwebuike in one of them. What about you?
All right. I'm just going to call him GI. All right. Yeah. We'll just go with GI.
GI, I like that. GI.
Well, yeah, I don't know who.
They like Jefferson out there too. So I mean, I'm just saying.
It's gonna be. Those are the two. And is it gonna be a timeshare-ish type thing, or is one gonna get more work in different parts of the game, different areas of the field? That's a big question. What was it? Was it? It wasn't a Thanksgiving game. Was that when Jamar Jefferson had his big game?
Yeah, I think it was.
Yeah. So, but even in that game, I think GI came in and put up some stats that week. So it'll be interesting to see which way the workload goes. But yes, I absolutely would take a flyer. For whatever reason, I'm leaning towards Jefferson. And, and I started thinking about these things, and I was like, you know what? Why am I contemplating over the number 3 and number 4 running backs for the Detroit Lions? I literally checked myself and I said, you know what? I'm just going in a different direction. Like, seriously, why am I going to do that to myself?
I completely, but again, it goes back to what we were saying. This is 2021 fantasy football. This is what this is, right? And I got into DFS a couple years ago. Thankfully, I did, and I love every minute of it. But it opened me up to a different side. And I'm like, wait a minute, like this is so much better because now I don't care if the dude gets a concussion, he's out this week. I can just start somebody different. I don't have to worry about IR and my roster, and especially this year. I mean, like you said, look what I started off the show with. I'm scouring the waiver wire, and I'm Amir Abdullah. When has he been fantasy relevant? But I had no choice because I had to start a running back, and I got nobody.
Yep.
So it's just. It has been absolutely brutal. It really has. But looking at this running back overall, I mean, listen, you got some injuries in San Francisco. Is this going to be the JaMychal Hasty week? You never know. It's Kyle Shanahan. You just never know what he's going to do out there. Every time we think we know what he's going to do, we don't know what he's going to do, right? Jeff Wilson looks like, he may not play, or even if he does play, he's going to be hindered a little bit. I know it says he will be one of the primary running backs, but he just still nursing that knee injury. So you never know. Even though it says primary, you just never know with the San Francisco 49ers. So I'll stay completely away from that. But let me ask you about Seattle, because, that's another guy I had to pick up. So, you have Seattle, and I'm looking at the running back situation. I'm like, oh, you know what? Who knows what Alex Collins, it says that he practiced and he's back. The abdomen feels okay. But you got Adrian Peterson out. You got Travis Homer out. So you have a 3 triple threat out there with Collins, Penny, and Dallas. And I'll be honest with you. I honestly think Rashad Penny could be a very, very sneaky, low risk, high value pick this week against a Houston Texas defense that gives up at least 108 rushing yards per game. They've already checked out. Davis Mills, the quarterback now, they've given up. They're throwing in the towel. They know what's coming. So, John, do you have any sense of what way this kind of timeshare is going to go out there in Seattle against, I have to say, a Seattle team in their own right that hasn't been very consistent this year either?
Not really. I mean, even before the Peterson signing, Alex Collins is running between the 20s and not very well. You got Homer or Dallas coming in on third downs, and Collins wasn't even, I don't think, getting the goal line work. So it's that whole dynamic in the backfield out there. I mean, truthfully, it's another situation I want to avoid. I would rather play a guy with a bad matchup, but a more guaranteed path. You flip a coin. There's so many backfields that are like that this year. Even look at Atlanta. Not that it was great. I mean, you could call Patterson whatever he is. He's a stud, but you got Mike Davis and then Quadri Olison coming in. You know what I mean? You got 3 guys out there. There's a ton of teams like that. We already talked about San Francisco. You got Philly, Miles Sanders, Jordan Howard, Boston Scott. It's tough to trust a lot of these situations just because you don't know how the timeshare is going to go. And truthfully, there's no consistency. It changes oftentimes week to week.
No, it does. And you don't. I remember the Seattle situation. Wasn't last year, maybe the year before, and everybody thought it was going to be Rashard Penny. Actually, DJ Dallas comes out of nowhere. We didn't even know who he was, and all of a sudden, he's the guy running the rock, right? So you just never know. But again, when I talk about these, just for the audience, when we watch it on replay, I'm not talking about these are one of the guys you lean on. I'm talking about when you're completely desperate, right? And you're season long league, because I'm not saying I'm going to pay in DFS. I'm going to pay $5,000 for Rashad Penny. What I'm saying is, if you're desperate, you have a complete decimation of running backs on your roster, and you're looking, especially week 14, that this could be the beginning of the playoffs for a lot of leagues, and you really need to win. It's one and done. So you really got to make some tough decisions this week, because going down this list, John. I mean, if I said to you, and you may know this or not, because I was shocked, but if I said to you right now, what running back is in the top 5 that you would not expect for fantasy production this year? That if I said it, earlier in the year, hey, this guy's going to finish as a top 3, top 4 running back. This guy who's one of your old boys from your old stop in Pittsburgh grounds, okay, that's actually playing very, very well. Who would you guess? Would you have any idea?
I probably would have went Mixon.
James Conner.
Yeah.
Right? And you know why? He's getting the touchdowns.
Yeah. Well,
right? He's touchdown dependent. I get. He honestly is. He has to get touchdowns, right? But who would have thought the guy's got 12 touchdowns? He's tied for second with Mixon for the most for running backs of fantasy production, right? But who would have thought right now he's listed, right now for the year, he's listed as the 8th best running back in fantasy, right? But again, if you look at the last 5 weeks, he's number 5. If you look at the last 3 weeks, he's number 4. I mean, James Conner, I mean, a lot of it obviously is injury to Chase Edmonds, but a lot of it is because of that offense, because that dynamic of that offense, with Rondell Moore, with Christian Kirk, with AJ Green, with DeAndre Hopkins, with Zach Ertz now, and Kyler Murray, that's a highly talented team. So whenever you get a chance to get a running back like that, I think it's a great opportunity. This week, 6,200 going up against the Rams, who their run defense has not been great as of late. But looking at this, you mentioned James Robinson. I mean, he's down there. What about David Montgomery? Have we finally seen David Montgomery back to full strength? I mean, the last few weeks, he's finally looked like he can do something. I mean, last week was a tremendous week. His yards per carry was in the fours, finally back. Looks like, a long run of 24. He had actually 9 targets, John. 8 catches, 9 targets. I mean, that is Mr. Check Down himself and Andy Dalton. But do you have faith against Green Bay on the Sunday night stage with a guy like David Montgomery?
I mean, yeah. I mean, he's at a decent price point. And at what, 5,700.
Yeah, 5,700.
That's a decent price point. And even in season long, you mentioned, like, do you really have an alternative? Like, if you're talking about your fantasy roster, like, you can't get too cute, and that goes for regular season or talking daily. Don't try to get too cute and start, trying to outsmart yourself. Like, go with the tried and true. Look, he has a tough matchup, but the Bears have been able to stay in game, so it's not like they've abandoned the run. Hopefully the targets are going to be a thing that he would continue it, but Justin Fields ain't that type of quarterback. Instead of dumping the ball off to his running backs, he's going to take off and scramble. So, I don't really see a whole lot of receiving work, but if Fields can move the ball and they get in within, in the 20-yard line, they're going to run it. And I could see some touchdowns in his future. So I like the David Montgomery pick.
Yeah, I do. I like what he's been able to, for everything you just said. Just listen, Nagy was successful last year because he rode David Montgomery. I'm not saying they were a playoff team by any means. What I'm saying is, the offense rolled a little bit more. It was very more productive when they were giving the bull the ball. So, this week or this year hindered when he got hurt a little bit, when he hyperextended the knee, missed about 5 to 6 weeks. But knowing that he's back at full strength, they're going to lean on him. They are, because Nagy wants to save his job, and I don't even know if there's anything to save his job. But the only way they're going to win is obviously giving the ball to Montgomery. So yeah, for 5,700, I think that's a really, really good play. Anybody else, John, from a running back standpoint that kind of sparks out to you at all, or you just kind of like, blase?
I mean, it'll be interesting to see. You mentioned Abdullah. I want to see how Carolina's backfield plays out this week.
Yeah.
And probably even more so, I want to see how Tennessee's backfield plays out this week with McNichols back. You got Hilliard, who had a pretty big game, but then Donta Foreman, he put up 100 yards too. So it's going to be interesting to see how that workload. You could find a gem, but which of the three is it? I don't see McNichols isn't going to get the a big workload, but he could be the third down guy. But what's that do for Hilliard and Foreman? It'll be interesting.
Definitely. And that's what it's all about, fantasy this year. It's all about week to week and finding out where these guys are going to roll, who's going to be leaned on, what the volume is going to be. It's just, it's great. And that brings us right to the receivers. And, a guy that's been consistently at the top, no matter what, every single week is Cooper Kupp. I would have never predicted Cooper Kupp to have this kind of year. I mean, we're week 14 right now, and we're talking 100 catches, close to 1,400 yards, double-digit touchdowns. He has been the most consistent fantasy wide receiver in football. And this brings you back to days of, DeAndre Hopkins, Devontae Adams, who obviously Adams is up there as well. But John, the only thing that scares me about Cooper Kupp is every week his price point is so high. I understand that he's consistent, but you can't spend $9,200, in DFS for a wide receiver and him give you 10. If he's going to give you 10 points, you might as well just put the X in that week and you lost already. So that's the only thing that scares you, because you look at him as opposed to just say Stephon Diggs, who I understand is not consistent, but it's like, okay, Stephon Diggs, 8,100. Another guy, Chris Godwin, 7,100. So in my opinion, I think you could build probably a better lineup with the Chris Godwin instead of paying up for Cooper Kupp. But if he's been so consistent, some guys will be like, I'd rather just pay out for Cooper Kupp and take a couple value guys. What's kind of like your strategy when it comes to wide receivers on the top guy like that with 9,200?
Yeah, he's been consistent, but he also he's just been consistently good. Like, I'm not going to pay $9,200 for a 20 spot. Like, that's not really, it's not
I
worth
agree.
it. Like, if I want 2x my money, there's a ton of guys out there I could do. I'm not spending $9,000. And he doesn't really, completely blow up usually. You could count on, 9, 10 catches, 100 yards, 20 points. All right. That's what it is. But no, I'm not paying up for that price point. The only guys that I have, and like last year, if we're talking Devontae Adams, when he's getting peppered and like he's getting double digit receptions and he's getting touchdowns every week, So like Devontae Adams last year was really probably the last time that I would pay up $9,000 or so for a receiver. Otherwise, yeah, it's too rich for me. And
Yeah,
like you said,
it is.
there's guys saving a couple $1,000s and still getting, those high quality receivers, that you mentioned, Godwin, typically it's a Keenan Allen, you save $1,000 for Diggs. Jamar Chase, $2,300 savings over
Yeah.
a Cup. I'm not saying that he's a guarantee, but yeah, I'm not paying up for Cup.
It's a lot of money, man. It's a lot of money. When and money is the name of the game at DFS, right? It's the name of the game. I mean, listen, I understand that he's coming back. And he just came back from injury last week. He did score a touchdown. He only had 2 targets. I get it, but DeAndre Hopkins to me at 6,500 is an absolute steal. I don't care who he's going up against on the Rams. Don't give me the Jalen Ramsey factor. DeAndre Hopkins is still a top 3 receiver in this league. And to get him under 7,000, I'm telling you right now, we talked about it with Kyler Murray. This is going to be a knockout blow from one of these teams, and they're going to trade haymakers all game. It's the reason why it's a night game. It's under the spotlights. It's a reason why they're going to battle. So, John, in my opinion, DeAndre Hopkins could quite possibly finish as the #1 wide receiver in fantasy on this slate this week. I honestly believe that. I think that this game is going to have so many almost FCC rules, so many sparks, okay, so many fireworks. So honestly, so many fireworks coming out. I honestly think that DeAndre Hopkins could finish as #1. And like you said, 6,500. You look at that Cooper Cup number at 9,200. I mean, listen. We're talking $2,700 savings. $2,700. That's a difference from taking when you have $4,000 left. Now you have 6,700 left. Think about that. Like that's what you have to look at when you got DFS. So, in my opinion, John, I love DeAndre Hopkins this week.
I mean, he pairs up well with Kyler Murray for you.
Yep.
I'm still skeptical of how the receiving pecking order is going to be. And it's, that offense, they've been winning games. That's all that matters in the NFL. Win your games.
True.
And they've done it. You mentioned Connor. You know what I mean? You mentioned Kyler. And then you look at the receivers that they have in, Hopkins, Green, Kirk, what's the other guy that I'm forgetting? The rookie.
Rondell Moore.
Yeah, Rondell Moore. So that's a lot of mouths to feed. And then who's been one of the hottest tight ends over the past 4 weeks? Zach Ertz. So that offense, I mean, there's so many mouths to feed and the offense is going that I don't feel that Kyler Murray has to lean on DeAndre Hopkins for all of those, receptions, all those targets, carrying the team. He can basically go to a lot of different guys and get the production he needs to win the ball game. So it is a good price point, and he could, lead receivers in points this week. But I'm skeptical that he's going to get enough looks because that offense is just so good, and there's so many options that that he'll put up top stats.
Yeah, no, it's a good point. I mean, I just think the way I look at it is I like the logic. I would just go with that logic against a matchup that when they're playing the Jets or the Texans or somebody that's not in their division and they're not battling for supremacy. And I think when you have games like this, your best performers step up, and he undoubtedly it's Listen, DeAndre Hopkins versus OBJ, right? He's going to want to show up OBJ. He's going to want to show up Cooper Kupp. DeAndre Hopkins will be like, yo, I'm the best receiver in football. Give me the rock. And when you have a relationship like he does with Kyler Murray, I think that could really, really be one of the deciding points. Now let's go over to Mr. Shanahan in San Francisco. And obviously, Debo dealing with a groin. Debo Samuel has again been another guy. What a gem in fantasy football. If Debo Samuel could stay legitimately healthy 100% of the time, he could possibly be the best receiver in football. He could be. The problem is he just can't stay on the field. He's multi-talented, does so many different things, right? But he still is questionable. The groin injuries, soft tissue injuries, when you're dealing with a number one wide receiver, it's really tough to lean on. The hamstring, the groin, it's not, you never know what's going to flare up. That's why I wanted to ask you, John. He's $8,000, and then you can pivot to Brandon Ayuk. And I know Brandon Ayuk is 5,800, and I know a lot of people are very skeptical, but these are the games I look at against Cincinnati who can be passed upon. But we're looking at a guy who's got volume. John, you're a huge volume guy. And I understand that you had to do something with the volume, but he's been consistently getting 6, 7, 8 targets every single week since about week 6 when he's finally showed back up into the fold. So I think this is another guy you could pivot to on an offense that we talked about. It's going to be down 2 runners. They're going to look to do a little something different. And Jimmy Garoppolo has actually been playing pretty well as long as he doesn't get touched. So, John, Brandon Ayuk, do you think he could give some value? I certainly think he can. What do you think?
Yeah, he's at a pretty good price point. And, you mentioned Garoppolo, and, when we were talking about quarterbacks, that would have been the only guy that I could possibly sneak in at a cheap price. You know what I mean? You get Jimmy G in there. Yeah, he has been decent. He hasn't been turning the ball over. So yeah, I like Ayuk. Is it? I don't. Me and my son were going back and forth. He's like, "Why do you say Ayuk? Why do you say Ayuk?" I'm like, I don't know, but yeah, no, I like him. And surprisingly, going into the year, you're thinking, well, San Fran, they're a running team, Garoppolo or whatever, Trey Lance, and now all of a sudden, how do we have Debo Samuel, Kittle, and Ayuk as all 3 viable options in the passing game, from a fantasy perspective. But yeah, I mean, I could if Samuel's out, I like him. It's a good value. I don't know that I would trust Samuel with the injury and at his price point.
Listen, it's $8,000, and that's what I always look at. It's a huge deal, right? Huge deal. $8,000 is a huge deal. So you definitely got to keep an eye on that. So let's do this, John. Last couple minutes that we got, last 5-10 minutes. We'll do some low risk, high reward players. We've talked about some already, and then we'll do a couple bold takes before we get out of here. Again, Fantasy Firebox brought to you by the good boys at Win Daily Sports. Go find WinDailySports.com. Sign up for that free membership. The optimizer is like no other. Telling you, man, these guys legitimate. I'm a part of them, but I am by no means one of their experts. There are some guys that have a ton of knowledge, more than I do, and they are doing some tremendous things. So please go check us out over there. You will not be disappointed. So right off the top, John, any position that jumps out that we're talking about low risk. I love the low risk plays. I started it for the NBA, the FFVP. Fantasy Firebox value plays, guys that are in the NBA under 3,500, guys in Major League Baseball under 3,000. We'll talk about guys. NFL is a little different from price point, so we're just going to talk about overall value. Any guy that you feel or guys that give you that very low risk after you build your core that you could throw in there and could give you a very rewarding day.
Yeah, I mean, at receiver, I'd like Jalen Guyton.
Yes, huge.
I talked about Herbert. He's going to have to throw the ball. There's going to be targets available. I like Jalen Guyton slightly over. Is it Palmer? I think is their other receiver.
And John 3,400 for Jalen Guyton, number one receiver, 3,400.
Yeah, so I got him locked in. At running back, I could go Ty Johnson if you want to get Coleman's out. Yep. Michael Carter's still out. Who knows what Walter's going to do? who, scavenged a goal line carry
Of
or
course.
whatever.
Of course.
But, like you said, it's such a low price point. Somebody's going to have to touch the ball for the Jets offense.
That's that's listen, that's where we're at. That's what we need to look at, because we're at the point where you just don't know who's going to play and who's going to be viable. So you have to take these things in consideration. I'm going to be honest with you. A guy I love this week in the receiver position is my man that comes with two names in Mr. People Jones from Cleveland. And the only reason why I say that is, this Cleveland Baltimore game could definitely have some fireworks. We talk about these type of games, and for some reason, I know that I'm going to go strictly with a Coker stat here. Now, I'm not talking about he hasn't set the world apart in points the last couple of weeks. We're talking about 2 or 3 points from a fantasy DFS perspective, but the guy has gotten the volume. So even though he played last week or in week 12 against Baltimore and only got 3 points, he had 5 targets. The week in New England had 5 targets. Arizona, 5 targets. The Chargers, 6 targets. The guy's getting the targets. And, for some reason, Baker Mayfield really likes to throw to Donovan Peoples-Jones. So I think it's something to keep an eye on. And again, price point, 3,900, right? 3,900. I know. Listen, Jarvis Landry doesn't have a designation for the game, but he does have nagging knee issues. So you have to be weary of that, right? You have a receiver who's got bad knees that can't play all the reps. So who is going to go to next, right? You have to look at that. Is it going to be Rashad Higgins, right? I get it. But again, 3,300, 3,900, either one of these guys, John, I think in Cleveland, I know I'm relying on Baker. Not everybody's loving on Baker, but I think they're going to have to throw the ball a little bit in this game. So I think Peoples-Jones for 3,900, you could see a stat line of probably about 5 catches, 75 yards and a touchdown. I think he gets one of those toe touching end zone fade routes that he scores on, and everybody's happy for 3,900. So he's my secret play for receivers is Mr. Peoples-Jones.
Yeah, I mean, it'll be interesting to see what Baker does in this game. This is a big divisional game. They want to run the rock, but yeah, I mean, somebody has to catch the ball. So, and I mean, he's a talented receiver, and he didn't have that much of an opportunity when OBJ was in town. So yeah, I mean, he could definitely do it. He could put up a good stat line for just hitting that lottery ticket.
It is. It's all about punching that right ticket. And talk about tickets. We're going to talk bold takes here. Any kind of bold take that we have. I love ending the show on this because these are the guys that can punch your lottery ticket. And I'm going to go first here with my, I love this bold take. Every week I love the bold takes because who cares if they're right or wrong? They're bold takes for a freaking reason, right? So it's like, hey, listen, you got $10, throw it on that 7-game parlay and maybe you get lucky. For me, it is the bold takes. And John, my bold take is you're going to like this. We're going to have double D's in the top 5 for fantasy running backs this week. Double D's, baby. I'm going Deonta Foreman and Devontae Freeman are going to finish as a top 5 running back in fantasy this week, where the running back landscape is decimated. Okay. That there's going to be a weird guy that shows up. Well, I'm going to go 2 guys that are going to show up. I'm going to go Freeman and I'm going to go Foreman. I'm talking about 2 guys at 10,800 combined, 51, 57 respectively. They're going to give you that winning lotto ticket this week. So Foreman, Freeman, punch it up, bold take it a week, top 5 fantasy running backs, man. What do you got, John?
I'm going Stephon Diggs, 150 yards receiving.
Ooh, I like it.
The
Buffalo offense coming back this week, huh?
It's time. It's time to come back. Going against Tampa Bay is never easy, but their pass defense is, not the greatest. I think Josh Allen's going to have a little chip on his shoulder. You're playing against Brady, in Tampa. But look, they got to win games. You know, they're not sitting pretty in the passenger seat riding a 1 or 2 seat at the moment. So they need to win games. When you need game winners, you get your studs. And I see Diggs and Allen having big games.
I like it. I like it, especially because if you look at what happened on last week, where they couldn't even throw the ball, he's going to be itching to throw the ball this week. He's probably going to have 50 attempts this week. Josh Allen is, right.
He may have 3 picks because he's just throwing it regardless. He's just going to be so giddy. He's like, I'm just throwing this. I don't care. And
Oh my,
look,
yeah.
and Diggs could go up and get it, and there's your 150 yards.
Yeah, listen, no, again, and we talked about. Listen, I don't think we talked about it enough. You know, because we mentioned the Rams and we mentioned the Cardinals, but this is the same kind of showdown. Buffalo, Tampa Bay. These two teams are going to battle, and it's going to be haymakers between Brady and Allen. So, you know, these two guys are going to be airing it out. And what, you know, before we go, what's Gronk's number this week? 6,000 as a tight end, man. His number, you know, I love this. I love, and deservingly so. But 3 weeks ago, Gronk was 4,600, actually 4,400. And he's all the way up to 6,000 because all this guy's doing is catching touchdowns. His last 3 weeks, 25 targets. 25 targets. He's turning them into 17 catches for 300 plus yards and multiple touchdowns. And one of the biggest things, John, what I'll say, and it's showing this with Gronk, is his long catches are anywhere between 27 and 35. And that's what astounds me because, and I have to love Gronk. Number one, I love the lifestyle. My man's doing body shots on yachts, doesn't have a care in the world. And he stands up in front of the media and just says, hey, I don't read a playbook. I just show up. I show up and I run. If I'm open, I catch the ball. I mean, this guy, you got to be a fan of him, man. Those guys had like 13 concussions as well. But yeah, I like the bold take for Buffalo. I really do. But again, listen, on a Saturday morning, Fantasy Firebox, we went about 47 minutes. Tony Jigsaw Cutillo, great to have Pittsburgh John Coker here as well. You know, I can't wait. Listen, good luck to everybody. This week 14. Some people are starting to playoffs this week. Some are starting them next week in week 15. All depends on what kind of system you have. You know, get those streaming options. You know, John's talked about some really good plays at the Jalen Guytons of the world. You know, in Charger land. I gave you some Deonta Foreman, Devonta Freeman, maybe Peoples Jones, or some guys that we talked about. Replay it. Let us know how you look. Core players, Stephon Diggs, bold take, 150 yards. I like that. But everybody, like always, WinDailySports.com. Check us out. You will not be disappointed. Stay safe, stay healthy, and we will catch you next week.